You might have realized that we are skipping the panel, the focus talk in between by Mariam Chabani, who got ill. So we are immediately continuing onwards with the panel focusing on repair and new materials. It will be, of course, thought and conversed through the lens of how to repair the broken planet, to think about practices, methodologies of resistance care, and of course repair, and think about the new materials, about new places of co-learning, of co-liberating. And in this brief conversation, let's say how to think about some sort of a guide and a catalog, how to work or repair the rust, the dust and cracks in our homes, cities, and social relationships. I would like to use at least a minute of silence to commemorate the war atrocities happening in Gaza, Palestine, and in South Lebanon, in a way to turn this silence into action and take this moment to think, each and every one of us, in which way we could be undoing the war. So, a minute of silence. Thank you. We're going to start this conversation of thinking about undoing architecture as a violent act, and actually to think who decides what gets repaired, what is left to die. And first, I would like to welcome Liisa Ryynänen from Helsinki, Finland, an architect and an artist, to talk about her project Inventory, and we're doing a little bit of inventory work over here. And Liisa's work explores modern buildings threatened by demolition and emphasizes the value of low-quality materials and spontaneous user modifications. Liisa, how do you see this often overlooked architectural element not only contributing to discussions on care repair in architecture, but also representing forms of resistance to neoliberal urban redevelopment and commodifications of public spaces? And actually, what do you see, what is the political role of architect in such transformations of spaces?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's a good question because I haven't been actually thinking about the modifications and the added, often weak materials as intentional resistance. But I've been addressing more this, or seeing this as a phenomena where the user needs and designers' visions are in conflict. And of course there are like issues related to the class and taste and so on. But I started to think about it, and it's obvious that these modifications and these new material layers are presenting this more or less self-directed co-production of architecture. And in that sense, it can be thought as a form of resistance because it's often in conflict with this investor-driven architecture production that, for example, this so-called destructive redevelopment represents, and it's a huge issue in Finland, and it's targeting the modern building heritage especially. And what was the second question? It was related to the architect's political role. Well, this is a tricky question. tricky question as well, because I think it depends on the context. It depends on the local conditions and so on. But I think in general, of course, in the light of this overlapping ecological crisis and resource shortage, architects should start considering all the already existing materials as valuable resources. This is something quite obvious. But then also getting, I don't know, sensitive to this form of production by the users and try to think what is architect's role as a part of this. And this can be thought as a resistance for this other type of production that I mentioned. Yeah, these are some thoughts related to this question. Thank you.
Maybe just another question, because we can't see your beautiful installations and inventory. A question that we actually already conversed about, the choice of elements. What elements and what is their symbolic and concrete use?
Yeah, yeah. So the installation is a part of my wider practice, where I, like you told already, where I do research in buildings under threat of demolition. I collect their building components and materials, and in this inventory installation that you can see from the website, or for example from my Instagram, I was concentrating particularly to the elements that have been added there after the building was added to the original design. And what was your question? How did I choose these elements? Yes, for this installation, it was like elements and layers that are representing these changes and modifications for the buildings.
Thank you, Liisa.
Thank you.
So with us here on stage, we have Lila Kammerman from girlscanscan collective. And in a sense, we're going to be talking about unwanted heritage and their research project Tripping on Modernist Monuments that explores patterns behind demolition of 20th century heritage in Hungary. But the collective has been doing extensive fieldwork in Eastern Europe. And I was wondering about the political forces or historical narratives that are driving the destruction or neglect of these modernist structures. And through your empirical research and work with the grassroots and non-governmental initiatives, how do they challenge or complement state policies in preserving this architecture, and what implications this struggle could have for future of architectural heritage across Europe?
So I really appreciated the question when I read it, Ana Dana, because we had the chance to talk before, and that's not our proposal you're asking about, but it was our first project, and it started 4 years ago. It's more like an attitude and position we since continue. And it may seem subtle for you, but 4 years ago we were students in 2020, and it was just the 100th anniversary that students could enter the university in architecture. And we applied for this scholarship, and how we ended up meeting NGOs in the Eastern countries, and it was that every time when we study, we look to the West. That's mostly the paradigm of the studies, and we apply to travel from the point of view of Hungary to Ukraine, but it's very far from us. It used to be very far from us mentally, and Moldova also. And we decided to turn the questions. I think it's the most important thing, how you raise the question. We didn't ask anybody why you demolished the buildings. We asked the people on site, why are you sentencing your life, dedicating it to save this architecture, to save the material, to save the heritage? And we ended up finding out that each case is different, but you can learn from each case. You can learn from the many ways spatial practitioners, not just architects, very important, can react to these kind of questions. And that was a big step. And later on, we had this proposal of Budapest. Like, we come from the capital of Hungary, and it may be like a project which is bound to the city, but it's been going on for 50 years, this experimental urban mining procedure from the municipality. But what's more important, that there has been a parallel informal economy building up on it. And that informal economy is doing the most part. It's illegal, but the municipality has to realize that you cannot criminalize that because they alone cannot really tackle all that job. So it's sort of, we would love to be a mediator in that, to find a way to exchange for these like informal and formal parts, like members of this agenda to discuss, because they could really learn from each other. But generally in any of the projects, we uploaded 4 different projects to the LINA website. So they sort of resemble this position or attitude.
But still we should think about this practices not as illegal, but illegalized, made illegal. And also we should mention the Lomé practice that you started researching. If you could just briefly explain the project proposal. Thank you.
So it's a phenomenon from the socialist Hungary from the 70s that people started to suddenly have many goods and they didn't need it anymore, they wanted to dispose it. And in every district you have one night when you can put out your bulky waste, so not everyday trash, but like bulky waste in front of your street. And the municipal company comes by 6 a.m. and collects it. And that's where the magic happens. Between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. there is a whole informal market happening around in the city. And if you want to say it's fancy, there is like people who are collecting on site, taking it to their own apartment, repurposing, reusing, but are many, many collectives who are traveling to the capital, collect things, and repurpose it on the countryside. So that's a huge informal black market in a sense, but essential for the repurposing because the municipality is burning most of the stuff. So they are sort of saving and repurposing, which is a very nice initiative, but hasn't been researched up until now.
That's fantastic because it brings us to the idea of spolia, of a historic idea of spolia. We're going to talk about, in a sense, with Adam Przywara. Am I pronouncing it well?
Przywara, yeah, it's fine.
Thank you. And the questions and the term of rural architecture. So Adam's research on post-Second World War Warsaw and the rural architecture documents the use of salvage and recycled materials in rebuilding efforts. Adam, how do you see this historical practicing influencing contemporary approaches to circular construction and sustainable design, especially in the light of current resource shortage and the climate crisis? And also considering both your research on the post-war reconstruction of Warsaw, but also more contemporary research windows for Ukraine, how do you foresee this rural architecture contributing politically to political resistance against unsustainable urban growth?
Yeah, that's a lot of questions. So let me just say I'm very excited and happy to be here around with fanatics of demolition waste and all things deemed waste unlawfully and like yeah. So I'm totally happy to hear about the projects and thank you for the invitation. And so just to answer and give you a brief idea what I'm doing, I'm exactly researcher, academic-based researcher, but with a keen interest in curating and writing. And so I'm focused on this different horizon of architecture. So not architecture fixed on growth, as you said. We are thinking about 20th century and architecture as kind of growth-oriented, new materials, concrete, steel, glass, production rising without the end, let's say. But speaking from the perspective of Warsaw, but also Eastern Europe in general, I would say we have a different horizon, a horizon of scarcity, often forced scarcity, forced by war, by occupation. And I think there is something super interesting about that. Because when we think about contemporary conditions, every year in European Union we produce like 800 million tons of demolition and construction waste. And after the Second World War, in like Europe, across Germany, Poland, Soviet Ukraine, Belarus and Russia, there was around 2 times that. So every 2 years, European Union produces this amount of, and this is not war. I'm not talking about rubble produced by the terrorist Russian invasion of Ukraine. So we face the huge problem, and that problem can be, I'm not saying that it can be solved by history, but it can definitely be more kind of highlighted by history and how people dealt with that in history. And those practices of reuse, repair, recycling, all that is kind of coming up again and again in history, in times of crisis, in spaces of crisis. And I think Western Europe has a lot to learn from experiences from the East, from Warsaw, from Sarajevo, from other parts in that regard. Because it's not about voluntary degrowth and sustainability, but in the end we will be forced to kind of cut emissions, cut waste, transition. Yeah.
Thank you, Adam. Next, I would like to pose a question to Irena Kebler. Irena is a designer. Studied in Graz, right, in Austria, but based in Portugal nowadays.
Exactly.
We're going to discuss your project Prima Matters that emphasizes the transformation of local waste materials into innovative products. And in the context of social equity and environmental justice, can you discuss how community engagement shapes this project? And how do you ensure that the local residents not only participate in the design process, but also benefit from its outcomes? Also, as now we don't really see your beautiful products, maybe just to depict them in a couple of words, and to see what is your position, or how do you envision your work influencing broader political, social attitudes towards waste management within communities?
Well, the project Prima Matters is trying to rethink the use and the reuse of materials to actually give the waste the opportunity to be a resource again. So it started as a material research project, like testing materials, making a material library, but also engage with the community by doing like exhibition and hands-on workshops. So be not part only of the design process, but also like collecting the waste, collecting the residues, being part of like shredding, transforming, and being part of the actually practical part. And recently I was invited also to showcase the material samples at the Vienna Design Week. I'm part of the distributed design exhibition for open design, so it's just like giving this knowledge and the awareness, like how we can actually transform something, what's the recipe, step by step. And on another exhibition in Aveiro, which is the Portuguese capital of culture, I was also doing this exhibition, but also like working with the city workers or employees. So I give them educational training to know how to work with the, for example, plastic waste, but then they can keep going on. So it's not just me doing something, it's trying to have the influence that many people do the next step. So we were doing like workshops with kids, with elderly people. I invited local ceramic artists to try out my new clay recipes and their practice and be part of the exhibition as well. So it's really broad, like doing on one hand like laboratory material sample pieces, trying out different recipes, but then share it and give it a wide approach. And maybe I can also highlight one project as I was doing with plastic recycling. I'm also part of Precious Plastic Portugal, so we travel with the machines we actually build in our workshop from Portugal up to Mozambique. So there we build up like a plastic recycling station. So we work closely with local residents, city halls, institutions, universities to pass this knowledge and be part of the very first state, help them to understand how it works. And then, yeah, go on kind of a monitoring help. And yeah, I could tell many things more, but...
Thank you, Irena. Maybe there is already like a second stage of the project after this mobile practices happening from Portugal to Mozambique. Is there already something like a community overtaking the initial idea and continuing the work?
Yes, actually in Mozambique they are like active for 1.5 years now. So we have this WhatsApp group where we can chat and help. And they have this workshop there and work, do like from collecting plastic at the beach, like shredding it. We help them to transform them into something else and doing molds for them. So yes, it's not just doing one workshop and then it disappears. We always try to help in the process. And with the Prima Methods project, well, it's like a big, it started as a local material research, so, well, where you go in a different place, you can find different residues and explore more materials besides like the ceramics, the cork, the paper, and the plastic I worked so far.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Irena. Now we're going to continue with kuidas.works from the Estonian Academy of Arts. It's a group of designers, architects, and builders, and it will be wonderful to hear as a continuation of Prima Matters, actually, how kuidas.works work with site-specific materials and how they focus on ecological materials that bring attention to the politics of land use and urban development. How do you see this approach intersecting with the political debates on climate change and resource extraction and the global dominance of industrial building materials? And in a way, what is your position and how do you challenge or subvert the dominant power structures in the construction industry, particularly in terms of who controls material production and building practices?
Thank you. It's a very good question.
Sorry, your name is?
It's Maria. But yeah, I'm Maria, I'm an architect and I am representing a studio I helped to co-found that's called kuidas.works. But to answer the question, or perhaps I should do a short introduction to the project first. It's titled From Excavation to Elevation, and it looked at how to valorize or repurpose leftover excavation waste into viable building materials that could replace some of the materials or virgin materials that are being used widely in the construction now. And I think your question is very good in that sense that what we, in addressing in what we have done since completing the project. So I think for us now, it is very important to try to find a collaboration point with real estate developers and to promote research and collaborative approach to them. For them, for example, to invest a percentage of the budget into site and project-specific material research and material development, but it doesn't, I guess, only come down to the material itself, but also rethinking the logic of construction and the lines of production, etc. So this has been an important part for us since. But also our focus definitely is locality, perhaps even hyper-locality, meaning that we do promote that where the extraction is conducted, leaving a negative space or gap in the earth, that this same material would be used as a positive in the region, as a positive volume, a wall, for example. So, because taking the earth to landfill is probably the least environmentally impactful part of the construction process, but it is a huge waste of potential in terms of what that material could be and what it could replace that is used currently. And the second part of the question about subverting the dominant power structures, I guess it's a bit broader or more complicated, but it perhaps comes down to the laws and regulations on one side and the general raise of consciousness on the other. So these two main factors we try to engage with often. We try to we try to consult in as much as we can to help formulate new regulations, as well as our main formats have been very public in our studio. We work on an NGO basis, so we work a lot with lectures, workshops, exhibitions, to really try to help to promote these things, to raise the consciousness, to raise the awareness on these possibilities that perhaps this pile of dirt can offer in combination with other waste materials.
Thank you, Maria. Yes, and here with us today is Perillo from the tandem working together with Andrea Arcese. They're both architects and researchers, sort of rooted or springing out from Italy, but living over borders, let's say. But their research, Rome on Display, proposes leveraging temporary exhibitions to regenerate aging houses complexes in Italy. So I find this really interesting because you, in this approach, are addressing wider political issues of urban inequality and gentrification, especially in a city like Rome, in a city where iconic structures are often neglected, while new developments cater to wealthier citizens. And it's also interesting your idea of integrating exhibitions itself in urban regeneration projects, and how could that create a model where cultural institutions not only showcase art or architectural research, but also directly tackle social crises in direct building.
Yeah, in a certain way, I understand that there is a kind of risk during the renovation process to create gentrification results and inequalities process. These probably most of the time arrive because maybe there is a kind of focus attention in an economic value of the building in itself. So probably there is an intention to increase the value of the soil, the value of the building in itself, and this is really problematic. But let me say, Rome on Display starts from a poor interest that we have in the housing, the social housing heritage. I think that is really an overwhelming built environment that is common in a lot of capital cities and a lot of cities of Europe, especially in Italy. We have almost, if we talk about a special period that is between the two wars till the 60s, the built environment is almost the 60% of all the environment built in Italy after. So in this sense, is really an heritage that exists, is a physical presence, and we have to understand how to deal with this presence without trying to avoid this kind of inequality results. In this trajectory, exhibition can be a powerful tool, because exhibition has as well this attitude, a pedagogical attitude, to create culture, to create awareness, and it can act as well with the housing. I think, for instance, there is this installation in Biennale di Venezia of 2021, if I remember well, that was about Mala urban structure made by Christian Gantenbein. And was astonishing to see how a light structure of the exhibition can propose a different way to an abstraction somehow of a different way to live together, starting from an urban heritage. At the same time, exhibition as well can influence the trajectory of a built heritage. There is as well another example, always from Biennale di Venezia, but 2 years before. I went once to sleep in this disused prison somehow, that was Caserma was a military building, sorry, that was Caserma Pepe, that is in close by Venice somehow. And with the institution of Biennale di Venezia, they started a process to renovate it. But was really much more sensitive, this process, because they started to speak with the community, trying to understand which could be the destiny of that building, what can do for the community. In this, and from that point, from that period, then they started to do a lot of installation, implementing this process, and now it's a really kind of hub center for the community. In this sense, for the last part of the question, I think that cultural institution can have a kind of political engagement, because if you create with an exhibition awareness, cultural knowledge of the building of the community that is living inside, I think you create a kind of alternative point of view of the economical value of the renovation, or at least can be a mediation between economic interest and as well the building and the community interest.
Thank you, Loris. We're a bit over time, but we would really appreciate at least a question from the audience, if there is any. No? Okay. Well, thank you for showcasing your interesting practices and also extending it into the community practices and these examples, what Irene and Loris were saying, of course, Lila, and what kuidas.works is doing, and Liisa will be involving communities. And thank you, Adam, for introducing our rural architecture to us. Maybe just a last question to all of you, more of a provocation. It's like, what would happen in this repair and new materials if we would not be doing anything at all? In a sense, our actions can be easily co-opted by the real estate market, by different kinds of political movements, etc. Have you ever encountered such a position or such a project or such a situation?
No, I just wanted to mention two initiatives, or one book, one initiative, one the moratorium on demolitions in Germany. Like, I mean, in general, if we think about that, it's a shame we deal with demolition waste here, and in general, it's a shame that we deal with waste. But basically, this is the condition. But of course, there is a horizon of not building, not demolishing, and so I mentioned the demolition moratorium, but I should mention also the book which comes out next year of Charlotte Barth, Moratorium on New Construction. So there are ideas about what that we shouldn't do anything, and then it's, you know, it's a bit happening. It's not, yeah.
Thank you, Adam. Okay.
Yeah, I have in mind exactly the example that we brought for the proposal, that was the Olympic Village. What's happened to the Olympic Village? For a lot of years, no one take care about this pre-existence with this huge infrastructure, and then they started just to renovate it in a speculative way, and from a kind of social housing destiny, it became a kind of bourgeois dwelling. So, as I was saying before, I think that in this example, we can read the political role that can have an architectural project and an exhibition in this case, but I think there are a lot of strategy to understand that culture, to understand that different way of lives can interact with this process of renovation and avoid that it starts this kind of increasing value process that is, of course, excluding a lot of part of the population.
Thank you, Loris. Well, we can continue these conversations over lunch break. I think it's to follow, and thank you all.